It's been almost 6 months since we had the first recorded case of the coronavirus in Britain, so we've had a sufficiently long period of time to begin to discern which countries are doing well with the pandemic and which countries aren't. So, in that global context, I want to answer a simple question. How is Britain doing?
We will have a test, track and trace operation that will be world-beating.
We will get a world-class system. Promise that we will have a world-class system.
So far, 45,000 people have died as a result of the coronavirus, although if you look at excess deaths, that number's significantly higher, around 65,000. But let's take that low ball number of 45,000 people, which nobody is disputing. 45,000 people is a lot. It's around 4 times all the number of combat casualties sustained by the British Army since the end of the Second World War. It's about 15 times all the number of people who died in the Twin Tower attacks on 9/11. It's the same as the total number of British combat casualties in Afghanistan, 454, every day for 3.5 months. That's the kind of social calamity Britain has been subject to as a result of the coronavirus pandemic since the end of January. Now, we don't like to look at the coronavirus in that context. We don't like to place those numbers and understand them relative to other disasters. That's because we look at a pandemic, quite understandably in many ways, as an act of nature, an act of God, something beyond the control of elected officials, and don't you dare play politics. And if you are, by the way, just think about how much worse it would have been if Jeremy Corbyn had been Prime Minister. And yet, looking at how we've performed relative to other countries is really important. Yes, much of the focus has been on Western Europe and the United States, but actually when you look elsewhere, it becomes incredibly clear that Britain has dramatically failed in dealing with the coronavirus. The best place to start here is Vietnam. Vietnam's a poor country, it has a population of 98 million. Most importantly, it has a 1,400-kilometre land border with China, which of course was where the virus originated. And the number of casualties? 0. None. And only 300 recorded cases. And before you say, that's fake news, we don't know if that's true, that data has been corroborated by researchers from Oxford University. How did they do that? They implemented quarantine very early on, social distancing, closing schools, and arguably most importantly, they've made masks mandatory since March 16th to be precise. And that was before Britain was even doing daily press conferences. Now, this is particularly salient because we're looking at a country which has had no deaths and yet everybody's wearing masks. You'd think that'd be relatively important. And yet here in Britain, the debate around masks is unhinged. Increasingly defined by right-wing British men who claim that they could have dealt with war rationing and trench foot and yet are triggered to go down Marks & Spencer to buy their wine hamper wearing a mask.
Nothing would make me less likely to go shopping than the thought of having to mask up.
Then there's Cuba. Sunny, beautiful Cuba, which by the way has a longer life expectancy than the United States, despite being subject to crippling sanctions for the best part of half a century. There, the average Cuban is 70 times less likely to get the coronavirus than people in Brazil. And despite its relative poverty, only 83 Cubans have died as a result of the coronavirus. Now, this is really important to bear in mind. The Western Hemisphere is the epicenter of this virus, and yet one of the poorest countries there is by far outperforming not only the wealthiest economy in North America, but the wealthiest economy in South America. Then, perhaps most astonishing of all is Kerala. It's a state in the south of India. Average income is about $2,000 per head. It's got a population about the same size as Spain. There, fewer than 200 people have died. Fewer than 200 people. $2,000 per head means it's 1/30 as wealthy as the United States. And again, the reason why they've had so few casualties is because they've had social distancing, they've had quarantine, not self-isolation like we've had, and masks have been mandatory for a really long time. Cuba, Vietnam, Kerala, very poor places and all doing far better than Britain and the United States in dealing with this pandemic. Now, we don't just need to look at poorer countries. Let's look at Japan and South Korea. Again, very important because like Vietnam, They are the neighbours of China where this originated. In Japan, fewer than 1,000 people have died as a result of the coronavirus. Now bear in mind, that's a country of 120 million people. Perhaps the major reason why is at the beginning of April, the government sent out 100 million masks to every single household in Japan. Now, what was our government doing here in Britain at the beginning of April? You know, it was so long ago I can barely remember. Beginning of April. That's right, while Boris Johnson was in hospital, his most senior advisor, Dominic Cummings, decided to go to his second home 250 miles away when he thought he might have the illness, to County Durham. While doing so, he decided to take his son to hospital. He went from a high-risk area to low-risk area, thinking his son had the coronavirus. That's probably the stupidest thing you could do. It's almost like he was actively trying to send this virus as far and wide as he possibly could. There couldn't be a greater distance between the wisdom of the Japanese approach and the stupidity of how the British government responded.
No, I don't regret what I did.
Elsewhere in Europe, countries like Greece, Croatia and Hungary have seen fewer than 1,000 deaths between them, demonstrating that medium-income countries in Europe, like low-income ones in Asia and the Americas, did a much better job than Britain. Rather than implement quarantine measures and at least encourage face masks, Britain decided to run a £300 billion deficit and see, so far, 45,000 deaths. Now you have to ask the likes of Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings, was it really worth it?
No.
The grim truth is that alongside Brazil, the United States and Sweden, Britain has done an appalling job on the coronavirus, something which could have easily been avoided with decisive, clear action early on. Now, you're going to ask, who's to blame? The government, various public agencies, a decade of austerity, and yes, I think parts of the media too. But what I think underpins all of this is a cult of exceptionalism. That kind of tragedy can't happen here because we're British. Well, it has. 45,000 people have died, and unless we change our attitude, and quickly, that'll just be the start. If you like that video and you'd like to watch more videos like it, go to novaramedia.com/support, because crises like the coronavirus aren't going away anytime soon, and we really need to build a new media for different politics. But almost important, please mask up.